Mhm. Welcome back to the Cynic's Guide to Hippie Shit. So I'm here with Jo Hutton, and we are talking for the first time in 3 years. We've spoken once, twice since then. But 3 years ago we spoke about yoga and what yoga is, and your practice, and COVID, and a whole raft of things. And you're back. It's going to be back as a playlist on YouTube. But I thought it'd be nice to kind of introduce you again. And who are you? What is yoga? What's changed in the last 3 years? All of that.
Yeah, so is there a specific question you want me to start with?
All of it. Just yeah, where are you at with your practice and everything now? What's changed?
So I'm still a yoga teacher. I'm still practicing yoga. I've definitely moved more to the restorative side, I think. I was always a little bit more that way, but I think that I am much more explicitly um into more restorative practices than I was 3 years ago. I've started a blog called Yoga for Tired People, where I do one short video a week, um, where you don't have to change your clothes or get out your yoga mat to do. And I think after the pandemic, everyone was just so knackered and tired. And the conversation that I kept having with people and the conversation that I had kept having with myself is that yoga had become almost like something that everyone knew they should be doing, but they just didn't have the headspace to do it. And then it was becoming like almost like an albatross around people's necks
Mm.
because I think because yoga's framed as something that you could just like if you go to the doctors about something, that often it's said, oh, you could do yoga. So like yoga's almost just given as this like thing that you can do to make your mental health feel better and your body feel better and your back pain go away. And it's seen as this cure-all. And so I think people feel like, oh, I would be fine if I just did yoga. And so it almost like becomes this um like manifestation of how your wellness is your own responsibility, which I don't believe at all. I think that a lot of people's anxiety and a lot of people's pain is down to the fact that they're in painful situations and they're in situations that anybody would feel anxious in. And as a result, yoga has become kind of like muddy in people's minds. And when you're coming from a place of fear, it's not going to make you want to do yoga. And so I think that a lot of the time people are saying they don't have time to do yoga, and it's not the time, it's just that the relationship with yoga has become really complicated. So I just wanted to like cut through that as much as possible and be like, this is the simplest way to start doing yoga again, because yoga should and is be a celebration of all the things we can do. And it is really good for you and it does help your mental health, but it shouldn't just be an individual thing. We should be doing that alongside other things as well.
So when we spoke last time, I had a very kind of hit and miss relationship with yoga, and I probably did the old class with you and had no real excuses because, we shared a space. It wasn't that difficult for me to come along to a class. But then I did have a regular 6 months of coming to class because I did your pregnancy yoga. Um, and then I had the baby, and then I had a very good excuse not to do yoga anymore. But I did really appreciate having that kind of 6 months of once a week, having that practice of coming along and
I
doing.
think it's interesting, isn't it, that pregnancy yoga is a time when people really, I think it's a time when people who often have difficulty making yoga a priority, that it often becomes a time when they prioritize it. And I think it's really interesting because it's a time when it's not just for you. So it's like it's not I think sometimes yoga can feel like a nice to have, like a little cherry on the cake. It can feel like an indulgence after you've done your strength training and the real stuff or work or whatever it is. It feels often people feel like there's things that they should be doing, and making time for themselves to do something as indulgent as looking after their own mind and their own nervous system can feel really indulgent. And pregnancy is a time when you've almost got you've almost got a reason to look after yourself because you're doing it for someone else as well. So it doesn't feel quite as indulgent because it's like there's a reason.
So depressive.
I know it is.
But it's true, isn't it? It's like we need to give ourselves permission to like stretch and be kind to our bodies, and especially the whole idea of it being restorative. It's like, well,
Mhm.
that's not gonna. I remember back in the day, it was all about arms like Madonna.
Mhm. And I think as well, something like restorative yoga as well, it is a really scary place for people because I think people always think that yoga is all about relaxing and it's supposed to be this really nice and gentle and like um nourishing practice. And it 100% is, but um it's also a place to meet yourself where you are. And a lot of people aren't in a nice place. So
Mm.
when you slow down and you stop, it's very like mindfulness in that way, is that I think people get confused when they stop and it isn't pleasant or it isn't relaxing. So they think they're doing it wrong because they're like, oh, I'm not relaxed. So I must be doing it wrong. And it's like the relaxation comes after, like it's almost like a side effect.
Mm.
Um, and you sometimes don't feel the relaxation in the moment. And sometimes you don't feel it for years. But that doesn't mean that it's not doing anything. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot recently about how we're taught to look after our pain when we're younger. So if you've got like I've had to do this with my nieces, is that I notice that when they're in pain, my first reaction is to distract them from it. So if something bad happens, I immediately want to be like, let's go get a pizza. Let's go like let's watch the telly. Oh no, you're in pain. Let's go and get ice cream. Quite often it is around food, to be honest. But like it's like you get a treat to get away from the pain. And it I think that's like a reflection of how we deal with pain in society. And I think as an adult, like we have got this like treat culture, and there's nothing wrong with having a treat. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a treat, but if that's the only way that we know how to deal with our suffering or pain, then that I think that can become addiction and it can become like bad relationships with things, and it can just be a way where we're not able to sit with our feelings because we immediately want to distract from them. So when you come to restorative yoga and it's like, no, there are no distractions. And it's really interesting because I find that so I've stopped doing even like really intense restorative yoga because I used to do more yin practices where you would hold poses for a really long time. And I've stopped doing that as much as well because I think that sometimes people use that like intense feeling in the physical as a way to distract themselves from the moment. So it's like if I like I'll do a really intense hip stretch because then I don't have to think about what's going on in the moment. So I'm becoming much more I suppose radical about having practices where you're still and there's a stillness there. And I'm becoming more like, no, it's really important because that's how we process stuff. And if we don't know how to do that, then we're fucked.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're talking about movement meditation a lot more than what a lot of people would think of and a lot what Instagram thinks of when it comes to yoga.
Yeah, I think I think actually traditionally it's more in line with traditional
Oh
yoga
yeah,
practice.
that's why I said more in line with, yeah, more in line with tradition and less in line with Instagram.
Yeah. And there's kind of like two camps in yoga as well. There's like the camp which is more like stillness, and then there's more the camp which is in the more like working with the body. But even the one that's more working with the body, the traditionally the idea is that you kind of get through the energy of the body so you can go to stillness. So it's like you almost burn through the excess energy so that you can be still. But I think the stillness just doesn't gel with the priorities that we have in our culture. So it's a hard sell, Rachel. It's a hard sell.
And is it working though? Are you selling it? Are people coming?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you know it's really interesting. So I've got a restorative class tonight. And I never market myself in a gendered way. Like um I never say, oh, it's for women or it's for men or whatever. Um, but I don't know, maybe I must be a little bit sexist because in my head I would assume that women would be more interested in this. And it's actually about 50-50 men and women that come to my restorative class, which I just think is I think that's it's not odd, but it's worth I thought it was quite notable because I had just assumed because my other classes are probably 80% women, 20% men, but the restorative classes are 50-50, which I think is really nice.
Mm. So you still have the classes where, as I put it, you to put us into a position that's so complicated I have to stick my tongue out.
Yeah, I still have those classes as well. I definitely still have those classes because I think there's definitely a space for that. Because I think the thing with stillness is that a lot of people aren't there yet, ready yet. So you need to almost like do, you almost have to learn how to move before you can learn how to be still.
And even just the fact of, because I remember when I did have a stronger meditation practice than I have now, I would need to have some sort of ritual or movement to get me to the point where I could sit and be still. And I think that's partly because we live in a busy life, busy world, and partly because I've probably got a bit of ADHD,
Mm.
that actually to kind of just go from to sit in isn't going to work for me. So I quite like that kind of right. You stand on one leg, your arm there, your arm there, da 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 da. I could only do that without thinking about whatever it is that I would have been thinking about if I was sitting. So I find that helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the way that I frame it, the way that I understand it, I don't know if this is the right way to understand it, but the way that I understand it is that it's almost like you've got gears in your head and we live in fifth gear. And in order to get to first gear, so if sitting still is first gear, you can't, like, if you're driving a car in fifth gear, you can't just stop. Like, you have to go down the gears. And it's the same with your brain. Like, you've got like this speedy brain that is where you are most of the time. And then if you just stop, it's going to be really uncomfortable. So you have to kind of like go down the gears before you can get to that stillness.
Otherwise, you'd stall.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
been a long time since I've even attempted to drive a manual car, but yeah,
Well,
that,
I've got an automatic as well, so I don't know. I think so.